Welcome to Let's Talk BD podcast, powered by the BD School.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Let's Talk BD podcast. Today with me, there is Gilad. How are you, Gilad?
I'm doing well, Lucia. Thank you very much for having me. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much. And Gilad is we met through our business development community. He has a business development community himself, specifically for executives. So we're going to talk a little bit about community relationships and pretty much anything else business development related that is going to come through this conversation. So I would say, Gilad, without further ado, let's talk BD. And I would say, let's start with your experience in BD, right? So tell us a little bit more why did you start in business development in the first place?
Lucia, that's a great question. And thanks again for having me. By the way, as we mentioned, we've known for a while. I really appreciate the work you do at the BD School, the fact that you provide the tools and the capabilities and the methodology for business development executives. So I'm a great fan. And your question is great because it really takes me probably 10 years back. I relocated with my family to the US and I was doing project management. I was responsible for a group of project managers. And in the relationship between a vendor and a customer, specifically in technology, or in my case in technology, I had visitors come into my project. Yeah, big names, little names, Accenture, Ericsson, IBM, SAP, Microsoft, smaller names too. And I was trying to figure out, okay, so I'm the vendor, I have a customer. How best can I manage these guests, these visitors? And I said, okay, let's create a mental frame, and let's call this mental frame strategy. And let's address the partners as part of my strategy, as part of the business strategy, as part of the project strategy. And as time went by, and to your point, it's been a bit of a journey. It took me several years, 10 years, 12 years, to understand that my focus has shifted from project management to other stuff. And only then I understood that maybe all this other stuff be better called business development. Now, that's very broad, but that's what I loved about it, the fact that I came to do business development.
Yeah, I love it because I think we have exactly the same experience in that sense. I think the majority of business development pros, they have the same, they kind of find themselves in BD, or maybe they realize after a while, it's wait a minute, if I look back, actually, maybe it is business development and so on. But as you said, and it's difficult, right, to even just put your hands to it because it's so broad, right? So how do you define business development? For me, it's always I always like to hear different perspective on it. So what's your take?
Yeah, there are great definitions out there. It could be the formal textbook definition, or it could be the casual definition. I really like to ask a similar question as you did. And through the answer, I get the person's vibe, what their focus is. I'll give you my definition. It's not a textbook definition. It's just something I kind of stepped into and I refine as I go. My definition of business development has 3 pillars, which means whenever I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, yes, I'm doing business development, I look for a flavor of these 3 pillars and I call it to sing. Why do I call it to sing business development? Because I look for 3 components. The S goes to significant. Whatever I do as a business developer has to have a significant impact on the business. Whether I work for a startup, whether I work for a corporate, whether I'm an individual, a consultant, my doing as a business development has to be significant. It's not negligible. It's not marginal. It's got to be significant. The next comes the innovative. So sing S, and then the IN is for innovative. It's not about doing more of the same. I got to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do something differently. There's the operation that does the same. The train is on the track. Hard work. But business development is about not doing more of the same. Whether it's brand new, which is probably the closest to innovation, whether it's a new territory, whether it's a new product, whether it's a new strategy, that falls under that innovation, of the singing. The last letter or the last pillar is the G, the growth. Business development is about growth. It's, as I said, not operational. It's not about cost reduction. It's about contributing to the business potential. And now, if I put together all these three components, the significant, innovative growth, that is what I believe encompasses the art, because it's not a science, it's the art of business development.
Yeah.
And through that, you'll find many definitions such as relationship building. Fantastic. It's part of this. It's part of the song. It's part of singing. You speak about strategic activities. Absolutely. Significant new growth requires a strategy. Mention relationships. Many things that you would typically associate with business development, all fantastic definitions from my perspective, come in under the definition of singing, significant new growth.
I love the single. So one thing I like to do, especially before these interviews or webinars and so on, like to kind of like relax a little bit. I actually like to sing like the 90s song, you know? So when you said like the sing framework, immediately I was like, oh yes, I would sing like Backstreet Boys and so on. So do you have some songs maybe that you listen to, you know, when you have to pump yourself for business development? Just a bit of a random question.
Well, that's a fantastic question, Yuchi. I love it. I actually do like music. Here to my left or to my right, actually I have a guitar hanging on the wall. Unfortunately, I don't play it as much as I should. I'll be very casual. I'm very fortunate. I have 4 kids. My older daughter is 21. I have 2 boys, and then my younger daughter is 11. So throughout the various ages of my children, we listen to so much different music. There wouldn't be necessarily one specific song. This morning I listened to his name, John Myers.
Yes, I think I forgot. Yeah, don't know him, but the name rings a bell.
Very easygoing. I really like enjoying music while I do.
Nice. And you know, like I actually asked you this because I wanted to pick on a little thing that you mentioned before, which is business development at the end is an art, right? And you know, there is always like a bit of like it's not even a debate, right? Because I think it's most people accept that business development is more of an art because indeed, I believe you need to be very creative, really lean into your intuition to really find these opportunities as well. However, what I like is also that you need to be very logical, really data oriented, right? So how do you balance that in your day-to-day job?
Yeah. So when I think of it, and this doesn't necessarily go directly to the question, but one of the things I learned the most of in my career as business developer is making mistakes. I can say that I made so many mistakes. Some are moderate and some were painful. But through making mistakes, you understand, okay, I should have done it differently. However, I find that I'm a slow learner. It takes me time to ramp up. By the way, maybe that's one of the reasons I chose a long-winded profession. It enables me to ramp up and to learn and evolve as I go. The way I try to manage this learning process and manage all the vast data out there is to speak with other professionals. I collect the data. I speak with people. I write things down because I have a poor memory, so I need to document things. I use some AI tools, not many. ChatGPT is probably my ultimate go-to. And then I gather all the data together. I kind of process it. There's this giant washing machine going on in my brain. And then I narrow things down to the most important. By way of example, sing. These 3 anchors came after a lot of analysis, a lot of gathering information, asking feedback from many people, getting some more tips from our good friend ChatGPT, but then boiling it down to, okay, what exactly does it mean to me? In this case, or in the business development case, it's about significant innovative growth. But that's the way I try to process the vastness of data out there, dilute it into a few significant points that help me continue and kind of guide me through my career.
Great. And well, for all of you watching, probably you noticed at some point I had like 10,000 different facial expressions because you gave me so many insights. I had to write down some notes because I want to ask you so many questions. So thank you so much for that. And one actually is about failure, right? So I really believe that. So I like to think that I'm very growth minded and I really look at failure as an opportunity to learn, right? And improve. But mostly to learn more about myself and then grow basically as my career grows. So going back to some of the failures, do you have maybe an example, maybe like one failure which was particularly painful when that happened, but then actually turned out to be a very good lesson that then you use every day now?
Yeah. Wow, that's a great question. I'll start with a broad example with your permission.
Go ahead.
Looking back, when I failed, now failure is a hard word, but when I wasn't successful, and yes, when I failed, I think the biggest reason, the biggest obstacle was that I was driven by my ego.
Mm-hmm.
My decisions, my approach to the relationship, to the partnership, to the business challenge involved. I'm not saying eliminate your ego because the ego is a driver. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in those occasions when I failed is where my ego drove me instead of and going back to your previous question, the data, the ability to analyze the route and build a solution. Now, specifically thinking of a painful failure was probably maybe going back 3 or 4 years. I was in a company that partnered with one of the giant system integrators, and I was introduced to a software vendor that was theoretically supposed to complement our solution. So our solution covered scenarios A, B, and C, specifically in enterprise software, a CRM-like solution.
Mm-hmm.
And this partner covered XYZ. And we said, okay, there's a lot here that we can complement each other, but there wasn't enough to connect us. And at a certain point, I said, I'm not going to let this happen. I think this partnership is bad for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And my boss tried to, the boss is the boss, the CEO is the CEO. He said, hey, look, try to figure out a way here. At a certain point, and I involved so much of my personal ego saying this is the wrong solution. I'm not going to let this happen. All the negotiation took so long. All the parties become so in conflict with each other. I can tell you that the person who gained the most out of this partnership was the lawyer who worked on our contract. He probably bought a Porsche.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Eventually, we signed off on the contract and nothing in the relationship happened. Everything was so sour, so bitter by then. It was so driven by ego. I consider that, and I say regretfully, I consider that a failure in my career. I was focused on the wrong thing. I focused too much on my ego. I didn't see the greater picture well enough. I didn't find ways to come together with a partnership. And in hindsight, I probably should have managed that differently.
Yeah, I think this is a great point, and that's also something I see very often with our clients. When they come to the training, there is like sometimes I ask them, like, okay, let's say they do cold outreach as a main tactic, right? And I ask, okay, well, how is it going? It's like, no, that doesn't work. I'm like, why it doesn't work? Like, yeah, nobody replies. And I'm like, why nobody replies? And then when you go granular, you realize that the main problem is not necessarily the process itself or like that cold outreach doesn't work, but it's the fact that they're so convinced it's not going to work that they are not going to put the effort into it, right? And then you enter in this sort of vicious circle, and I've seen it a lot. But I mean, I talk about cold outreach, but in my case, I think I've been in the same situation very, very often. Like a stupid example with the webinars. Like I remember we started doing it maybe 2 years after launching the BD school. And it's just because my team started to nag me so much. And it's like, you have to do it. And I was like, no, we're not going to do it. I mean, fundamentally, there was, my bias on that is like, no, I don't feel like doing that. It's a waste of time, Mostly though, what I realized later was actually sort of like fear. I was actually fearing of being there. But just as you said, at the end of the day, it was my ego, right? Because like, well, it doesn't matter. You're scared or not. You have a business. If this helps your business grow, you just do it, right? Which I think is a bit the essence of BD. It's about going out of your comfort zone, right? So do you have maybe an example or like from your career, right? Where you really had to really go out of your comfort zone to do something, a new business development initiative, for example, but then the rewards were so high that you were happy that you did that.
Great. It's a great question. And I'll actually involve our sister discipline, which is sales, right?
Mhm.
Sales, marketing are kind of surround us on a day-to-day basis. And again, to a degree, you know what? Was it about ego? Not necessarily. It was about the definition of my job. I was actually in a position where I had to sell, chase the purchase order, count the dollars, and myself as a business developer, I say, wait, but I'm not a salesperson. I'm a business developer. And we go through effort in defining how different these professions are. And I said, you know what? I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm expected to sell. Let's take, life gives you lemon, make lemonade. Life gives you lemon, make limoncello. And I actually said, okay, for the next X, and it was a matter of weeks or months. Nobody asked me to transform my profession. It was a matter of weeks. And I said, okay, I'm going to don the hat of an account executive and sell. And you know what, Lucia? I loved it. Was I the ultimate best salesperson? The answer is probably not. I learned so much about my customers. My sales/business development pitch refined so much that I understood that what we're selling to our customers is, I had to redo the pyramid. Instead of saying, okay, we have products A, B, C, when you go in front of a customer and the customer looks at you and says, I don't care about your product. I care about what you actually can do for me. Mm-hmm. And if I wouldn't have gone out to the field and acted as an account executive, as a sales rep, it would have probably taken me much, much longer to get to this recognition. But once I hit the wall and the customer, I stand in front of the customer and I see the customer rolling his eyes, I said, okay, this is the basic mistake I'm making. I got to start by pitching the value to the customer, and only then saying, in order to achieve this value, here are products A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. Great recognition, great epiphany. It wasn't easy, but it literally took me outside of my comfort zone, saying, I am going to be a salesperson, and I loved it. I benefited significantly. It wasn't easy, though.
Very good. And Gilad, it's like when we talk about sales, marketing, BD, it's like I always go crazy because like, oh, BD is not sales, But there is, of course, a lot of things that we can learn from these other domains, right? Now, obviously, the first one is really understanding that at the end of the day, every customer, but also partner, and that, I want to exaggerate and say that everyone in life has an agenda, right? So whoever we're talking to, if we manage to understand their motivation, their goals, we're at a better position, basically, to connect with them. But going back on the learnings, right? So what are other things that you learned from this experience as a sales manager, right? That then you translated back into business development, maybe your top 3 learnings.
Yeah. So I'll start with my favorite. I was trying to figure out how to best build my daily schedule. Mm-hmm. How trivial, but it's not that trivial. And what I figured is that I want to, because business development is so much about the planning and so much about the long term. We spoke about that. And sales is more transactional. It's more maybe short term, more iterative. And it took me time to figure out that and here's my key learning. The way I want to structure my day is, let's say, whatever it is, I start my day, let's say 9 a.m. I start my day at 9 and I'm very transactional through probably midday. By midday, let's say, again, just for the sake of the example, by, let's say, around 2 o'clock-ish, I calm down. I gradually ramp off my day. and I debrief towards the next day after. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? And then how can I plan the next day and engage better with customers? And that's something I wasn't used to do. I used to think months out, years out, I don't know, 5-year plan. And suddenly here I am in a position that I got to plan my day, more transactional, more short cycle. But it actually helped me, number one, engage the next day better through the lesson learned. Understand that I cannot sell for the whole day, be it 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, doesn't matter. I wasn't able of staying at such high intensity levels for a full day. And even if I could, the next day was such a low, such a down that I felt I'm missing out. So by breaking out that day to transactional and then debrief, reflection, improvement towards the next cycle, that really was probably the key takeaway from my experience. And then I try to apply that to my business development profession, saying, okay, within my planning session, I also need to be more transactional, more operative, and then do the lessons learned, bring my conclusions back into the greater plan. I can't just plan for a year. I got to be more iterative and break it down. So that I think is one of my key learnings.
Yeah, very good. I think also in terms of like planning, like it's, we saw it also in our community. Someone was asking just a couple of days ago, actually yesterday, and it was like, well, there is a lot of long-term activities in BD, but are there some quick wins? What can I do, right? Now, obviously, in the context of this conversation, obviously, we cannot be super specific, right? Because, it would imply knowing a lot about how the person does BD, what are the targets, the responsibilities, and so on. And I think in BD, just as you said, it's really about the balancing, right? So long-term strategy, which we do need, that's the essence of what we do in BD, with more, let's say, short-term tactics, right? Or something that can generate results a little bit faster, right? Do you have maybe some examples or like based on your experience, right? And what you do on a day-to-day basis, how do you divide your time between long-term versus short-term? And do you have a couple of examples of like a more long-term BD initiative versus more short-term?
Yeah. Wow, fantastic. I think this is probably touching the essence of business development. So I think in going back to the great conversations coming up on the BD WhatsApp community, that question about short term really kind of struck me. It's a great question, and my initial response is, "Ouch, that's a tough one." But then, and I think this probably goes back to previous things that I said a couple of sentences ago, and things that you do, Lucia, at the BD school. A quick win is learning. You're not going to close the partnership. You're not going to close your quota from today to tomorrow. What you can do is learn. And we're fortunate to have so many learning tools. Either it's reaching out to a colleague and asking questions, Googling it, ChatGPT, the BD School collateral. There's so many ways that enable us to learn. That, I think, is a quick win. Hey, dear boss, I did some research and I found that A, B, and C. Now I'm going to apply this in my long-term strategic plan. We're not conflicting our long-term strategic plans, but we're actually contributing by learning. And learning, fortunately, is a quick win. The implementation of it, more challenging. But learning as an activity, I think, is a fantastic quick win that can be achieved and contributes significantly. So hopefully this gives some kind of, or this is an opportunity for me to share my thoughts and answer the question that came up in the chat.
Yeah, I agree. And then I'm looking forward, of course, he's not going to get the answers straight away, right? So he's going to have to wait for this episode to go live, but hopefully they can reach out to you on the community. So they're quite lucky in that sense. And very good. And, also in terms of time management, right? Which is something I think many of us in business development struggle. I know that, for example, if I'm too overwhelmed, if I have too many things on the plate, paradoxically, I tend to be more efficient, but that is not sustainable, right? So I cannot have like 3-4 weeks of like calls back to back, 8 hours, right? So it doesn't work like that. So it's really more about finding a balance, right? So in your case, like, how do you manage your time really on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Wow. That's a painful question because I must admit, I'm the worst procrastinator. I'm the worst time manager. I tend to delay things, and that actually puts me in a very challenging position. And to your question, I constantly, on a daily, hourly basis, reprioritize. I start my weekend, so I'm my work week is typically a Sunday through Thursday. Saturday night, I look at the week ahead of me and I plan. What are the priorities I have? How are the priorities? How may the priorities change throughout the week? If this call gets canceled, which information do I lack in order to be prepared for my next call on Thursday? So kind of what if scenarios, constant planning. Wake up in the morning, I plan my day. I try to understand, am I prepared? I have a call at, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Am I prepared? When I'm going to have my lunch? It's okay to postpone my lunch, but I'm going to be hungry. So I'm going to have to make sure that I come in prepared. It's so much about planning. By the way, business developers love to plan, or they should love to plan. But both on the macro and the micro, planning constantly helps me overcome my procrastination. Constant reprioritization. It's not just the prioritization that I give upfront. Upfront is reprioritizing. And by the way, I try to make it very clear to my colleagues, partners, surrounding, wife, family to say, hey, today we have a deadline at 1 o'clock. I need everybody to know about this deadline. It's my deadline. I'm going to need your help. Please know that come 12:30 in the afternoon, I'm going to nag you. So again, it's part of the plan, but it's also sharing this plan with my colleagues, my partners, my surroundings, so that they know what my plan is and they can prioritize accordingly.
Great. Thank you so much. It's actually, when we talk about prioritization, I think like sometimes the problem is seems to be time management, but I realize more and more that it's actually about priorities, right? And the thing is that as business developers, we do so many different things, right? So I'm now training someone in France, and she's like, she's working on so many levels that I told her, like, look, you need to be careful, because if you spread yourself too thin, not only you're not going to be able to actually achieve any of these things, but in reality, you're also going to burn yourself out, right? So I think it's important to keep a little bit of that balance. So do you have maybe some tips on prioritizing both initiatives, considering that someone might be doing at the same time, like a bit of sales, a bit of partnerships, a bit of marketing, and so on? And of course, really prioritizing the initiatives, but also the individual opportunities, right? So are there maybe some criteria you look at, or like what is your standard process to prioritize your activities and business development initiatives?
Yeah, great. So first of all, what I've done the last, let's say, year or so, I prioritized sleep. Sleep is important. Sleep, food, family time is important. And it sounds funny, but we find that sometimes, and I think you said it about your colleague, your mentee, we find that we work ourselves so hard that we wear out, that we lose focus, that we maybe lose patience, maybe we steam out at someone, and that's not the pleasant way to go. So as naive and as ironic as it sounds, prioritize yourself, your sleep, your personal time. But to your point, what I the kind of in my immediate answer would be the priority goes to what's part of my strategic plan. Because if it's not part of the plan, I'm not saying I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to ask myself, is this the right thing to do? If it is, let's add it to the plan. If it isn't, maybe I shouldn't do it. So I'm trying to tie everything together, the business development skills and traits, long-term planning, very broad vision, but also short-term planning and reprioritization. So when I come to take a task, is this part of my strategic initiative? Strategic plan. I'll give you an example. Right now, in my business, I do business development in two key domains. The one is in software services, and the other is in bioagriculture. So I'll give the bioagriculture example. We were focused on one specific territory. And then we were called in, we had a prospect from a different territory, completely different territory. And we were extremely excited about this because my colleague and I said, wow, this is fantastic. We've been doing so well. People hear about us and want our services and business in other territories. We were also psyched up about it. And then I stopped and said, are we doing the right thing? And as painful as it is to say no to business, the conclusion was, this is not part of our strategic plan. This is going to demand so much energy out of us. Let's reprioritize. Let's deprioritize this activity. And as painful as it is, say, sorry, but this is not, we're not going to give you good service. Potentially in 2026, we're going to expand to this territory. We'd love to be in touch. So this is just an example of how the strategy, the prioritization, and the focus all tie in together, and it should all sing well together. Easier said than done, but it should contribute to the significant new growth of the firm.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, because sometimes it's especially on the being difficult to say no, right? Because again, we said it, BD is it's not a linear type of job, right? So you could find opportunities literally anywhere. Maybe, you're talking to someone on LinkedIn, you find out you have something in common, and you think, oh, wow, it would be so cool. Actually, maybe we can work together on this marketing campaign, for example, right? But just as you said, it's not that we should take every opportunity, right? We should really be able to see what helps us to get closer to our goals. And for me, I always tell to all our students, always start with the end goal in mind, right? So decide what it is that you're working towards, and then everything else, you just forget about it, which, like you said, it doesn't mean you're never going to do it. Because maybe in the future it does become a priority, but I mean, we have limited resources, right? So we need to be cautious with that. And, talking a little bit more about you as a person, right? So this obviously behind every business developer, there is a person. And I always say that for me, business development is not just a job or a career, right? It's more of a lifestyle, right? And it really goes hand in hand with your personal development, with your values, with how you look at the world, and you also started when you talk about your SING framework, right? So it needs to be significant, right? To the business, but obviously I like to think also to you, right? So obviously family, it's a very important value for you, but what are some other, let's say, your top 3 values that really rule your life, right? So, and that you really follow all the time, that you cannot really compromise in life as well as in business?
Wow. Okay, so I guess I put personal relationships at the top. Probably soon after would be self of fulfillment. So understanding that I have my goals. You spoke about the end goals, and I'm managing gradually, respectfully, while I'm not stepping onto anyone else, because we have my previous goal as having good relationships in place. And probably the third value would be a process of continuous learning. I'm not I'm not a genius. I have many flaws. My way of improving is by constantly listening, learning, and trying to do better next time, while maintaining great relationships, while understanding the end goal in place. And that, to me, would probably be the blend of the 3 factors that guide me both professionally and personally.
Yeah, and I can definitely see the first one in particular, right? So again, as we said, we met on the BD School community, but you do have a community yourself, specifically for tech business development executives, primarily in Israel, right? So where you are based, we did not mention that at the beginning, but Gilad is calling us from Israel today. So how do you build these relationships, right? Because in BD, we always say, okay, like it's all about relationships, right? Then in reality, it's so difficult to get in touch with people for many reasons, right? So sometimes it's like, the other person is not really responsive. Sometimes we see we see someone on LinkedIn with 20,000 connections, a CEO, founder, and then you get scared. You're like, oh no, I shouldn't reach out, So how do you build these relationships? What is your process? What should we do to build these relationships?
Wow, that's fantastic because it's a great point. So thanks for raising it because it really is close to heart. What I found that works for me in building relationships is being genuine. I genuinely want to meet someone new. I genuinely want to listen to this person's challenges. I genuinely want to find ways to help. Will I manage? Do I have a 100% guarantee? No. But I've got to be genuine in my motivation to get to know new people. It's not about just going to an event and having some snacks. It's not about just connecting to someone on LinkedIn. To be honest, I do that from time to time. Oh, this is an interesting person. I want to follow them. Am I ever going to be in touch with them? No, that's fine. When does it come into effect? When it's genuine. I genuinely want to connect with someone just like I did with you. I found interested in what you did. We reached out to each other. We found ways to converse and to communicate. That's where the great relationships come through, both personally and professionally. We tend to say, okay, what's in it for me? What am I going to get for it? Fine. It's okay to ask myself, what am I going to gain? Because it leads to, as you said, the end goal. Fantastic. How can I contribute to the person sitting in front of me? How can I genuinely help them? We find ourselves many times saying, okay, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to say. It's a good thing to say. It's the right thing to say. But it becomes even more effective if you're genuine about it. How about if I introduce you to two people? Hey, I just heard of a project in Switzerland that may be interesting for you. Hey, I'll keep that in mind because in a month's time, there's an initiative that could be relevant to you. And being genuine about that goes the extra mile. That's about just that makes the difference between getting to know someone to building an actual fruitful, efficient, contributing relationship. Genuine.
And what does it mean to be genuine?
When I mean it. When I say that I'd like to help you and I find a way to help you. When I say that I'd like to listen to your challenges, because many times we come and we just speak about our product, speak about how great we are. I want to listen to your challenges, be genuine about sitting there and actually actively listening. I mean it. When I ask you, could you share your challenges with me? It's not just because I'm going to drink a coffee in the meantime. It's because I am committed to myself and to you that by the end of a conversation, I heard your challenges and I'm actively thinking of a way to help you solve some of your problems, achieve some of your goals. If I can help you achieve your end goals, we're going to partner together much, much better. That's about being genuine, about being very sincere and focused and meaning what I say. I say, I'd like to listen to I'd like to learn your business. I'd like to learn what your challenges are. And, oh, by the way, there is something I can do to help.
And, how do you, because what I notice sometimes, especially for people, maybe junior business development pros, but to be fair, also experienced ones, that are working for a company more just because they need a salary, let's say, right? So they're not super passionate about that and so on. Because I think so, premise. I think it's much easier to build these relationships when you're really passionate about what you do. Like in my case, for example, like now, like we just talk like on WhatsApp. I said, look, I think you should come to the podcast. So please come in and say, okay, sure. We already talked a few times. And it has been the case with most of the guests here. It literally took one message. I was super excited about it. I recognize the value of yours and all the other guests. And I'm just super interested in hearing your perspective, right? But again, I made my career around that. I love business development. I'm very passionate about it. Then, sometimes you just have a job, like you're working, let's say, for software company that is just automating a little small part of the process, it's like very mundane, So how can you help yourself feel more like passionate about it and then come across as more genuine with the people you reach out to? Because I think it's really a big problem. Sometimes I see it with our students like, yeah, but, like just ask them questions, see what do they want, what are their challenges, what are their pain points. And it's not that easy to do because they're not very passionate about it. So do you have maybe some, let's say, tricks, that people could implement, to try to come across as more genuine or be more genuine?
Wow, that's a great question, because I think it really talks to the soft skills of people and specifically to business developers. By the way, passion, everybody wants to be near passionate people. Passionate is almost contagious. When you're passionate, the other person becomes passionate. It's an amazing passion. I'll take this from my personal life. Looking at my children, when they come back home after they maybe had an exam and they succeeded, success builds passion. So when you build your annual plan, when you work with your manager, with your boss, your CEO on building the plan and defining the goals and the KPIs, make sure there's something there that is tangibly achievable. It's not just about, the 5-year plan is so difficult. We got to quadruple our ARR. Extremely challenging, important, very challenging. Make sure you have, it's not necessarily the quick wins, which we spoke about. It's make sure you have the tools, the knowledge, the environment to be successful. And with success comes the passion, and the passion feeds back into success. So they're like mutually linked to each other, but knowing it that you're stepping into something that is interesting, that is challenging, that you can succeed at, definitely helps build passion. Otherwise, no passion, no energy, no electricity in the air. I'm going to fail. Hey, who cares? I'm going to lose my job. Who cares? But if I know I can be successful, I can repeat my success, I can learn and grow, I'm going to be passionate.
Yeah, I love this. And I believe it so much. And, like I have a bit of a reputation with our students, which is sometimes when they come to the training, some of them, they come when they're just starting a new job. So they're super excited about it. They really want to prove themselves and show that they have what it takes, Some others, though, they come at the end of their, their time with the company. Let's say they come, they typically self-finance the course because they're trying to find like the last step, to really try to get results. And, if it doesn't work, they're done, And I have a bit of a reputation because when I see these people in the second case, like I feel so bad for them. I feel like life is too short to be working at a company that doesn't speak to your values, that you're not aligned with and so on. Because not only you're going to be miserable and indeed then eventually you're going to quit, but just like you said, right, you're not going to put passion into it. It's going to be like every day is going to feel so heavy. You're not going to get results. So it's going to be really like a waste of time for everyone. So I always say, but you don't want to find another job, So I go, you don't want to start your company because I think, you have this very unique skill that you should use, and typically they follow my advice and then they come after 2 months like, actually, I started the company. So I'm always very proud of them because again, like, I think we should be aligned with our values, with our passions. That's really, I think a big part of the success in BD really comes from the companies we choose to work with and really how we dedicate our time. And speaking about success, right? So how does success look like in business development? Like what's your take on this?
Wow. Success is, I think, first and foremost, subjective. My success may or may not be considered as your success. And we think we need to understand that. Something that I consider successful wouldn't necessarily be my colleague's success or my boss's success, or something my boss thinks, wow, that was really successful. And I say, what do you mean? I only had 20 people on the webinar. I expected 50. And my boss says, wow, we had 5. So I think we need to understand that success is very subjective. We also, going back to the end goal, success needs to be tied back into the end goal. How do we measure success? Well, number one, it is subjective. Number two, and this goes back to the challenge of business development, very difficult to measure the KPIs of sales, marketing. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's clear to define KPIs in these other disciplines. It's harder to define the KPIs and the measurement of success of business development. To that, I'd say, have your plan in place, have the milestones in the plan to say, okay, I haven't yet closed all the partnerships because a partnership with Google, IBM, Microsoft could take 2 years, but here are the milestones, and I was successful in my milestones. And overall, if I want to look at the profession of business development, I probably go at measuring the ROI, the overall return on investment. And that means a long-winded, effortsome, you got to work, you got to invest. That's great, but break that long-winded plan into smaller chunks and then measure your success, and understand that it's subjective. It's individual. Maybe a success could be, putting together a webinar. Maybe a success could be sending out a newsletter. Maybe the success could be ending a meeting with the customer, agreeing to have a follow-up, whereas previously the prospect wasn't willing to have that follow-up. I will, with your permission, tie the measure of success back into the conversation about prioritization and reprioritization. If I prioritize properly, I have greater chances of managing my goals and therefore being successful at what I do. Is it easy? No. Is it part of our job? Absolutely.
I love this. And it's just like you said, also to me, when people ask, what does it mean to be successful in BD? And I would say it depends, but because it's also like, to me, but I agree with you. For me, it's really about return on investment, right? So if I'm doing something, I want to have indicators that it is the right idea, right? Then obviously I know that I cannot expect like millions for every initiative we put in there. Some initiatives, they don't even require, right? So they don't expect you to generate revenue, and that's okay. And I think that's also another important topic for companies, right? Because far too often they really measure BD just in terms of revenue. And I think it's really a waste, because then you're really limiting the potential of your team, right? So for me, like, the wish for me for the future, for the future generations, is really like that companies finally understand that BD and sales and marketing, they're separate things, and business development can really be a catalyzer for growth, as long as you enable them to experiment, to try new avenues, and really to be more innovative in the ways they do business. And with this, also, I have one last question for you, which is, what is your wish for the business development field moving forward?
Wow. I think my wish, and at the BD School, you do a great job of it, is providing the tools, the methodology to help business development managers, executives, our representative, be more successful at their jobs. There is so much out there about sales, about marketing, about co-development, about product marketing, a tremendous amount of knowledge out there. A lot of investment, the industry invests in these professions. I think the industry, by large, hasn't invested enough in the profession, the challenging, fun yet challenging profession of business development. And my wish is to have more tools to make the business developers successful And with that, we will see growth and prosperity, and everybody's gonna enjoy and benefit from it.
Awesome, Gilad. Thank you so much. As usual, I really love our conversations. I think we should just record also the other ones we do more informally, right? Where we just catch up. But of course, I hope also like all of you watching this podcast also found value in what Gilad just shared with us. And in case anyone in the audience wants to reach out to you, Gilad, what is the best way for them to do so?
Absolutely. First of all, with pleasure. Either it's the team on the group, on the WhatsApp group, and specifically, I work pretty well on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. Anything I can do to help our audience be better business development managers, I'm all in favor.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gilad. So for everyone, I will put the links, of course, to his LinkedIn profile so you can get in touch. And then, of course, to our community, which we mentioned. If you're based in Israel, we're also going to link the community of Gilad so you can also participate to various meetups and other initiatives that he carries out. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you enjoyed this episode and all the other ones, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you're watching to us on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, of course, consider rating the podcast and obviously follow us so you don't miss any other episodes. Gilad, once again, thank you so much. And for everyone, we're going to see you next week with a new episode of Let's Talk BD podcast.